And we have now approached into territory where, for the 5th time now in 11 seasons, the Seattle Mariners have technically missed the playoffs by 1 game, or close. Tiebreaker is this one. So it's technically 2 games this year, but it's only 1 game in the standings. And it is so close, because there's also only 1 game separating the 2 tiebreakers between the Mariners and the Royals this year. Doesn't that make you feel good? Oh, and here I have another fun stat for you about this Mariners 2024 season. The Mariners' expected win-loss this year is 54%.
One could only guess. They could only guess. Well, it's too bad the Mariners didn't have any games against the Royals that they could have won but actually lost. I mean, every game they lost, they just simply got way outplayed. Didn't favor them that day. Wait, what's that? I'm actually hearing word they had an 8-0 lead in Kansas City in one of those games and lost. Oh, I must have forgotten about that. Oh, it almost slipped my mind. Did I put a social post out about it today? Maybe, but still, it must have slipped my mind.
And it almost didn't matter, Lyle, because on top of that, if that doesn't piss you off enough thinking about that part, so there's only 1 game separating the divisional records for both the Royals and the Mariners. The Royals, I believe, were 33-19, and the Mariners were 32-20. 1 game. Do you think there was a game in the division this year the Mariners could have won this year? And then if they were tied in records, the Mariners then would have had the tiebreaker, because then it would have been outside of the division record, which the Mariners would have held that tiebreaker. Are there any notable games against bad teams in the division this year, Lyle, that come to mind?
Like the final 9 games against, I don't know, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, where they went 1-8? No.
Which team swept the Angels this week? Struggling to remember. Which team did?
Oh, would that be the Astros?
No. Oh, no. This week.
Oh, the White Sox?
Yeah. 8 of 9 losses to that team. Yeah, there's a lot out there. In summary, the Mariners are where they are because they could not win games they probably should have won. And now the season's over before October has even started yet again. And again, we can bring up the stat 5 times in 11 seasons. It's remarkable that it's possible for one singular franchise to achieve this, but legitimately finishing a game out of the standings for the playoffs 5 times in a decade. It's
again,
nearly 50%.
Yeah. Like, again, as bad as those Angels games were, how you go 1-8 against the Angels is unreal. Like, the fact you're not 8-1 in those games against the Angels, or even 5-4. You're 5-4 in those games against the Angels. You're 4-5 in those games against the Angels, right? You'd win the division, right? Or would it have to?
You'd miss out by a game.
Oh, so 5-4. So fine, you go 5-4 in those games against the Angels, you win the division. But you needed 1 more win to get into the playoffs, and I cannot get away. 8-0 in Kansas City, and you lost. 8-0. That's the whole season. Like again, you should have won way more games against the Angels, but that's the whole season. 8-0 in Kansas City.
And people wonder why Lyle and I send Joker videos back and forth so much. That's why. Right there.
Or a million Frank the Tank videos.
Yeah, you realize we thought about bringing out paper bags today. I'm just realizing that now as we're recording. Disappointing we don't actually have any paper bags available of just how the results turned out. If you want to put a smile on your face, dog, as we've officially concluded this 2024 season, does it put a smile on your face knowing the Mariners had an above-league average offense by WRC+?
No. Does it put a smile on your face?
A laugh. It's funny. And we're going to need to probably remind some of our listeners that WRC Plus is park adjusted, and the Mariners play in the worst hitters park in baseball. So for them to get to league average offensively is a lower bar than almost every other team. Or sorry, not almost, than every other team. They have to do less to reach the league average mark. So if you look at all like the slash lines, the runs scored, et cetera, all that stuff, like the Mariners are clearly worse than all of the teams around them offensively. Well, then based on their park, it's 102. Or sorry, it was 103. And you're sitting there thinking, 12th best offense in baseball? No. No way. So this is where someone will come to us and like, all right, nerds, this is why WRC Plus is flawed. And I'd be like, it's kind of hard to dispute because we're sitting here saying there's no way.
Like, I still think it's the best player stat in baseball because, like, especially when you're looking at offense. And we've talked to Goldie about this. And we've talked to Gary about this for why it really kind of encapsulates who a player is. But yeah, I'm starting to have some trust issues. Like, while we're in the trust tree here, I'm starting to have some trust issues with Team WRC Plus. When I see that last year the Mariners are 6th and this year they're 12th, and watching what that offense did each of the last 2 years and seeing that, yeah, I'm having a problem. Like, I'm having some real trust issues looking at those numbers.
And so it's like, all right, well, we just need to go by runs scored now. The Mariners need to go away from WRC Plus. Let's lead the league in runs. Well,
that'd be great.
Sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do that.
So a hypothetical, Lyle, if a team finished the season 12th in WRC Plus and 2nd in ERA, where do you think they would finish?
You would hope 90 wins at least.
Well,
Maybe
again,
90...
the expected win-loss total was close to that.
Maybe 95 wins if you're the best rotation in baseball.
You'd think. But no, 85 wins. Mm-hmm. That's what that formula has gotten the Seattle Mariners this season.
Awesome. And again, I'll say it again. If they had Brash and Santos all year, this year probably looks different too. But you should, like, this is such a disappointment of a season to the point where I think you can argue this is the most disappointing season the franchise has ever had. When you look at where expectations were and the fact that the American League was so down all year. It was a bad year in the American League. You had to do so little to get into the playoffs this year in the AL field. They still missed. With all that combined, expectations of the team, the roster that was on paper, and the entire play of the American League in 2024, to miss this playoff field is as disappointing a season as about you can draw up.
It's a pretty good way to articulate it. And we'll get to some of Jerry's comments here in a little bit. He does highlight, although not naming specifically in the article that Daniel Kramer wrote that we will pick mostly from, of some of those quotes that Jerry led when he held his impromptu end-of-season press conference on Saturday. But again, we'll get to that here in a little bit. The main thing that sticks out, and from what he said, is he feels like this team over the last 5 weeks showed what it was and that they still believe in this core. So, what does the season look like? What does this season look like with this core, even with all of the offensive struggle this team has? If the two guys you mentioned, they have Matt Brash and Gregory Santos healthy for the whole season, how much different does it look like? Because one of the most underrated weaknesses of this Mariners team was the middle of the bullpen. How are you going to get leverage outs away from Andres Munoz? How are you going to find that? How are you going to shut down the 7th and 8th innings this season? A big reason a lot of those they lost all those games to the Angels, Lyle, is because they blew leads in the 7th and 8th inning because they couldn't hold it because they didn't have the guys at that spot to execute in those spots when they needed to. If you have Matt Brash and Gregory Santos, this core makes the playoffs, and not as many people are complaining. You and I aren't complaining. This isn't an end-of-season disappointment press conference. It's, the wild card series starts on Tuesday. Buckle up, Lyle. Mm-hmm. That's what we're talking about instead. So it's disappointing, but then you can also say Jerry kind of has a point. If those injuries don't happen, those aren't guys you can just snap your fingers and replace. They tried that with Ryan Stanek, and he gets traded at the deadline because they he didn't fit their philosophy.
Right. And they had other bullpen guys step up this year. You just have to think about what the bullpen could have been with Brash and Santos. If you had a full year of Colin Snyder the way you did, where he pitched so well. If you get Troy Taylor the final 6 to 8 weeks of the season, where he turned into a leverage arm. So if you have all those guys lined up in the bullpen, where if you have Munoz, Brash, Santos, Snyder, Taylor, and again, obviously Gabe's our guy, but I can't get over how good he looked in April and how everything kind of changed in May, which was not too long before the injury, where he just wasn't the same the rest of the year because he missed a lot of time. They didn't really have a leverage lefty for a lot of this season. I mean, Sauce had a really good first half. I don't want to take that away from him. But seeing what Gabe did in April and then seeing what happened to him the rest of the year with that injury, like that played a big factor too. Like, not that you need a lefty in the pen, but he was so good and he looked so good in April compared to what he did in 2023. They just didn't have that version of Gabe Spire this year.
So that would have been, an enormously massive help. But then it also would have been great if you had a full season of what Julio did in the second half. And we're not talking about the bullpen troubles as much because, they score 30 more runs this season. They're also probably in the playoffs. If they just have that level of production from combined, like, can you get 30 more runs out of Julio and JP Crawford for this season? I would say there's a pretty easy scenario where you say yes, right? Yeah. I mean, and if you got those 30 runs out of those two, then again, the tone's completely different.
Yeah. I mean, JP went from what was an all-star caliber, even though he didn't make the all-star game last year, all-star caliber, like top 10 to 12 bat in the American League type of season last year to a career worst. So, there's got to be some middle ground there you can get to with him and Julio. Yeah, and you would hope that progresses back to the mean next year.
Yeah, you would hope so.
And then, also, while we're just going to wrap up the season talk, and especially while we're on the topic of the bullpen, we're going to look back on Jimmy Garcia's Mariners tenure with for anybody that sees those Twitter videos that's like, ex-players' career highlights with this team, and it's just 5 seconds of the song Hot by Gunna with a black screen. That's Jimmy Garcia's Mariners tenure.
It's the Tony Snell 28 minutes no stats game.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, he had stats because he blew leads in Detroit and they lost those games, even though the offense did nothing in those games.
Well, you could say his contributions to the team. Yeah, you could say that. Again, good trade, terrible result, awful result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
but you're going to look back on his Mariners tenure. Again, it's going to be the 5 seconds, just black screen on Twitter with Hot by Gunna playing.
And then Jonathan Clase is going to be, an all-star.
That would be something.
that would really be something.
Well,
an all-star. Sure. They play in game. It's like game 162 next year, where the Mariners are a game out of a playoff spot, and the Blue Jays need to lose. Let's say the Blue Jays need to lose, and the team the Blue Jays are playing, let's say they're playing the Orioles, hits a ball over the wall, but Clase, who's playing somewhere in the outfield, robs the home run. What's up the no-fly zone? Mariners miss the playoffs because they traded for Jimmy Garcia to pitch. How many innings did he finish with? 6?
Something
not many.
Like that. Let's look it up. But
not very many.
Yeah. Jimmy Garcia with the Mariners here in 2024 made 10 appearances. He threw 9 innings.
Well, best 9 innings in Mariners history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, those blown leads to the Tigers did them wonders.
Yeah.